people. And that's why I think it's an actual real opportunity for the next 5 to 10 years for LSPs.
And they'll be doing an economic needs test, they'd said, before admitting UK-based translators and interpreters.
I'm doing it, it's a passion, It's not just private equity, It's not just about money. It's about passion for what we do. And I think this also makes a big difference.
Hey, and Happy New Year and welcome to SlaterPod.
Happy New Year.
Number 53. Happy New Year again, 2021. All ready to go.
Yeah.
How was your break?
It was nice, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I was off for 2 weeks. Did not leave the house that much because of the national lockdown and etc. But yeah.
Yeah, it's gotten stricter again, huh?
It has. Yes.
Now we get a mutated virus, which
the mutants. Yeah.
The mutants are coming. Yeah, let's not do COVID talk. It's I think we're at the tail end of this, hopefully, and things are going to open up again. Probably in summer or something. So meanwhile, here we are in front of the screens. Got a fantastic guest today. Really looking forward to talking to Fabian Dietziger, the co-founder and managing director of Supertext, Zurich-based LSP. Obviously, I've known them for a long time. They're quite large. They're based across the city.
Mm-hmm.
So given super local. So, but they have offices in Berlin and in LA. So, but yeah, given the whole situation, we're not going to meet. We're going to do this remote, like with Kim, who was also based in Zurich. So, great episode today. Let's just go through this quite quickly today. I mean, it's a super busy start to the year, and I want to save some time for Fabian, of course. So first, let's just go through our latest report, Data in AI, and specifically targeted, or the report is specifically written for LSPs, because there's a lot of information around this kind of data annotation, data production out there, but not so much about what you actually should do in that space, how you can leverage some of these opportunities when you're an LSP. And there's many LSPs that are looking at this. So we ran a report. Quick Brexit update. Now it's done. Brexit is here. You've officially exited everything. It's crazy. We had on a side note there was the first RFP that didn't show up on TED, right?
Yeah, that was, I think that's being published today, tomorrow. This huge, massive tender for the Ministry of Defence. I mean, it just occurred to me, actually, that it wasn't on TED Europa. And obviously that's logical because we're no longer part of Europe.
Well, we're not either. And ours show up on TED.
Interesting.
Swiss. So, well, yeah, we've negotiated 40 years of, what they call bilateral treaties. So maybe that was one of them. Anyway,
maybe they still will be, but I mean, I think definitely this one was published on the Ministry of Defence government website, and I think it's a new website dedicated to their procurement. So it would be logical that they've set that up for that reason. But I have to confess, I did not do a massive, research.
It's fine. But tell us. Yeah, we're going to talk about some of the other things around Brexit with the linguists, and then I'm going to give a quick update on some interesting new regulation potentially impacting literally hundreds of boutique LSPs in the US, and then selection. We have 3 quotes we want to bring to you. Interesting quotes from our top 2020 quotes. Some hindsight, but let's jump right into our Data for AI for LSPs report. It's really popular. And it's been up there now for what? I mean, it was up there for the holidays, right? So we published.
Yeah, I think we published on like the 18th or something, pretty close to pretty close to the end of the year. Yeah.
So of course now it's being read as people come back to the office. So, but just walk us through step by step. What does it cover? How is it relevant for LSPs? And what are some of the lessons, and why should people go and get this?
Well, I mean, it's super relevant for LSPs. As you said, we've kind of targeted it at LSPs who are potentially investigating or keen to get into this area, but perhaps don't really have much experience or don't really know how to go about it. And I think for me, the best part of that really is the five case studies that we've put together. So we've got case studies from 5 LSPs who are now offering data for AI services. A different kind of case studies. So you've got the large LSPs, TransPerfect, Lionbridge, WeLocalize. Although obviously Lionbridge AI is now no longer part of Lionbridge, but they obviously did a lot of work in putting all of those capabilities together. And we had a case study from Summerlingua and also a smaller Canadian LSP, Oxo Innovation, who actually just sort of stumbled into providing these services when they were approached by a major client to do so. So I think firstly, looking at it from a case study of people that have already achieved, either a lot of scale or sort of earlier on in that journey, within this niche, and we do quite a deep dive into the landscape of or the competitive landscape, listing out some of obviously the major players, the well-established players, of which there are only a handful or so, but also discussing the startup, the sort of role of startups within the space as well. It really is a how-to. I think it really walks people through every aspect of how to do this. It's talking about how to differentiate yourself from a business model perspective, how some people are offering platforms, some people are focusing on the crowd and workforce sort of management side of it. Some people are doing super local language coverage, other people are offering worldwide coverage. We also talk about use cases for data. So how would that data then go on to be used by these AI engines? We look at the different various use cases for AI within different sectors like finance, healthcare, automotive, and everything like that. And we talk at
pause you for a second. If somebody missed the start to this, like, let's just unpack just briefly. What is it? It's not translation. It's not like transcription. It's not machine what type of service are we actually looking at? Because when people are looking at data for AI, they may think, well, it's technology only, but actually it's super heavy service.
Yeah.
So let's just get started. What is it these LSPs are doing? Why is it not translation? Or what is it? Why is it not kind of language services in how we understand it?
Yeah.
But why are LSPs kind of suited to do this in the first place? Why is it something they should be looking at? And what is it actually what is it they're doing? Like what kind of services and activities do they provide?
Yeah, lots of different services. You're right when you say it's not translation or localization, but it's definitely adjacent and can be carried out by a huge workforce across the world. So you would need capabilities if you were to provide coverage in different languages of different language native speakers. But I mean, we're talking about services like data annotation, like sentiment analysis, like search query relevance, image and video classification, content categorization. So it's all of these tasks which help the machine to learn. So helping the AI to learn, to grow, to perform whatever task it's being told to do. I think LSPs may already have some experience of this because, they're used to, for example, prepping text for translation memories back in the day or prepping bilingual texts now to be used for machine translation. Neural machine translation obviously would be an example of how you use data for AI. But obviously there's far broader reaching implications of how AI is being used across every different sector. But it's very human heavy in order to get those machines to a point to be able to work, to do the tasks that they're designed to do.
Yeah, and when you're saying like image classification, content categorization, for example, it's like, I mean, super simplified. It's like, okay, is this a cat? Is this a dog? Or maybe more in kind of with the self-driving vehicles, like what do you, maybe a self-driving car would film, and then you would like have to categorize, is this an actual person? Or is it just a traffic sign? Things like that, right? And
exactly.
then,
And you might need to draw, like things like drawing boundaries around images or objects
yeah.
within images is a good example. It's something that the machine can't do, but once the human's done it, it can use that information to then identify those objects in the real world, like with autonomous vehicles.
So there's all of these use cases,
Yeah.
and it's not just big tech. It's just this Tesla and Amazon. It's
Right.
I think that's what John Fennelly touched on a year ago in London. It's like, hey, there's all of these other enterprises that are now moving into using AI, and they
Yeah.
need some of these annotated data sets. And then from a business model perspective, I think we can leave it at that translation agencies, LSPs, are very well structured to handle large numbers of freelancers globally, including the payment, etc. So I think in this space, the crowds are even larger, or the pool of potential people that are working on this, right, are even larger. But I think from a business model operational perspective, it scales somewhat nicely for LSPs.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they have to completely reinvent their business model, and that's why I think it's an actual real opportunity for the next 5 to 10 years for LSPs. Were you in the first phase? Were you the Appen that realized this in 2010, or Lionbridge that had it, always had it, but then repositioned it and now made $1 billion exit? No, you're not. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking at it right now. So,
and it's a very high growth industry.
It is.
So now's the time.
Now it's the time. Moving over now, the time was for Brexit. So that the headline we had was "No work visas needed for UK translators, interpreters on short European Union trips." An unbelievable headline just 4 years ago. It's like, really, no work visas? But so is it good news, or is there some hidden bad news in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of caveats. So this pertains to UK-based translators, or I suppose it would have to be British national translators and interpreters who might want to go overseas to perform their work. Like you mentioned, that Ministry of Defence contract in the UK, that's a perfect example, because the Ministry of Defence, maybe is operating in places all over the world, and maybe they need to go and send linguists somewhere in Europe. So are those UK or British translators and interpreters able to go to countries in Europe in order to perform interpreting tasks and assignments? Yes, but I think there's quite a lot of caveats to that. So you've got countries that make a distinction between, I think, different types of freelancers. So you've got freelancers or independent workers that might hold short-term, like mission-based contracts, and then you've got other types of freelancers that might be part of a longer-term contractual agreement, for example, with an LSP or with an end customer. So they're slightly different. They're treated maybe slightly differently in some of the countries. So I think about 15 countries in Europe will, they say, assess the impact of bringing over a British linguist, assess the impact on local linguists, local LSPs, and they'll be doing an economic needs test, they'd said, before admitting UK-based translators and interpreters for a particular assignment. Most of the rest won't be doing that economic needs test, and it doesn't go the other way. So apparently the economic needs test is not a prerequisite for any EU translators and interpreters coming to the UK to work.
Yeah,
on a freelance basis, I suppose we should say we're talking about freelance rather than any kind of employee situation.
And I think you also mentioned that somebody actually condensed part of that 1,200 page monster that's relevant for translators, interpreters into a 5-page document, right? And we link to it in the article.
Yeah, there's actually two. So there's one which is a 5-page document that was condensed, and it's the points that are relevant for translators and interpreters. And then I think somebody else has done what they called a plain language version to try and simplify even that 5-page document. So there you go. It is complex. And I think somebody else made the point on Twitter that basically you need to wait and see how it all plays out in practice.
Yeah. Well, we should be good at doing plain language version, shouldn't we? If any industry is positioned for that, it should be us.
Yes.
Another kind of government related story came out of the US late last year, and Seema wrote about it. Obviously Seema is based in Chicago, so she's knowledgeable on that. I think the US federal agency, the US Small Business Administration, they've proposed a series of, they're going to, long story short, they're going to lift the threshold, or they're proposing to lift the threshold, the revenue threshold for when you're considered a small business. And that has some implications. So for LSPs, which fall under a particular code, it proposed would be going up from annual revenues of $8 to $20 million. So if that passes, you'd be considered a small business if you're up to $20 million in revenue as an LSP. And this is specific to industries. I think they have like 50 or like 100 industries that they're going to change those thresholds. And LSPs, each industry has a specific adjustment of the threshold. So for LSPs only, it would be moved from 8 to 20. And in that Small Business Administration, there's a database where there's like 3,500 LSPs. So this is, obviously we all know the US is a huge market for language services. So this could have a potential impact on the number of businesses. What would be the impact, P? Well, it's easier in some ways to get government work awards if you're a small business. And then there's some eligibility on certain loans and other, I don't know what to call it, like perks, like when you're considered a small business, right? In the US, you have all these different classifications that I'm not an expert on that may help you when you go for government business. Actually, the ALC, the Association of Language Companies, in the US, they've identified raising this business thresholds as a priority for their advocacy. But actually, there's some dissenting voices. We wrote about them. Like somebody said that it would actually hurt the very small businesses, right? So if you have a small business, you don't like that. Maybe some of them, they would say, well, we're really
because
small.
It's giving the same benefits to companies that are potentially sort of 3-4 times your size.
Exactly. So they would say, hey, look, so quote unquote, they said increasing the standard size will only hurt the very small businesses. In large metro areas, there's plenty of competition and more is not needed. So yes, it's basically opening more, it's making the field more competitive. And then somebody actually argued to lower the threshold to 4 million as well. So yeah, I mean, I guess the ones that are benefiting from this right now wouldn't want this, but the larger you are, if you're in that $8 to $20 million bracket, you obviously welcome it, right?
But I mean, 20 million for an LSP is pretty large. It's
pretty large.
If you think about how many LSPs there are above that threshold globally, it's not a huge number compared to the rest.
Sure, but you could also argue that, I mean, it's still on a larger scale, it's still kind of a small business. So, they would have a bit of a preference versus some of the top LSPs in government business. I don't know. So next steps will be that this is open for comments. I think in the US, often these types of changes you can actually publicly comment on it. And this is closing on January 12, 2021. And so we'll see what happens if it actually changes, and probably going to do another follow-up piece on the impact. Let's do one more look back. We plucked out a couple of quotes from our top quote selection of 2020, which is always this hugely popular segment when we publish it over the holidays. So I have a couple, and I think you have one. So first, I want to read one from Marie-Amig of Ultragram, who we had on the podcast. And actually, because it's something that I would think very different about. So she said, I never wanted to work with a salesperson because I hate the people who are pitching and just selling dreams. This business, the Gamelock business, really, you can't sell dreams. There's real issues that we need to corner, and we need to discuss them before saying everything is possible, because it is not. So
I'm 100% on board. What's wrong with that?
Well, okay, let's unpack this. So first, I love how she basically, I mean, that they grew the business, bootstrapped it, and they had basically no salespeople, right? So this is one approach that you can take in this industry. I'm more on the sales side. I think there's so much you can do in this industry, being super aggressive with sales, and you're seeing this in some of the most the most successful companies in this industry, right? So I would say, well, do you have to sell dreams and promise everything in blue, the blue sky and the moon and everything? No, you don't. But I think you're going to get really far if you have strong sales, and you as a business leader, you're going to have to rein your salespeople in a little bit. But just to close this, I do think having very aggressive salespeople is helping an organization grow in the industry, because is it overloading the PM sometimes? Do they hate sometimes the sales leader for just promising everything that they have to execute? Absolutely. Yes. But does it really help the organization long-term adjust and become more nimble and grow? Also, absolutely. So I like her quote because it's on a very different end of the spectrum than from what my thoughts are.
And it's contentious, clearly.
And it's contentious. Yes, I like it. Okay, one more from Chris, managing director of the new media lock organization, EGA. A very interesting or kind of original take on the MT debate. So I think we asked him, what's your take on the future and MT? And he said, it's really hard to predict these things, but I will say that my general thought is entertainment machine translation will arrive roughly at the same pace as when you would read a best-selling book that was completely generated by a Google engine. And I like that. It's, I like it. Let's just leave it there. So I think this is it's an original take. And I don't think a Google engine will write a best-selling book anytime soon, but let's see. So what's yours? You have one as well.
Yeah, well, it was very tough to decide because there were some very good ones in there, but I went for one that I think we talked about consistently over 2020, or at least quite a lot, which is from Alessandra Benazzi at ASICS Digital, Director of Localization there. She said, using one LSP's tool ties, i.e. TMS, ties an organization to the provider, regardless of the provider's promise of supporting vendor neutrality.
There's a lot to unpack.
There's a lot to unpack. I think they have a super sophisticated localization model there. We obviously did a buyer feature on ASICS Digital as well, where she explained some of that approach. But it's an opinion that I think is shared by many on the localization buy side, and it's one which seems to be kind of taking off given the sort of interest in TMS and all that kind of standalone software as well.
Yeah, I think we should have we will have TMS leaders on the podcast, and I really want to talk about this because and from both sides. I want to get people that from the LSP side that are that have tools, but also of course the TMS guys, because there's a bit of a struggle going on at the moment. Great. Well, let's go to Supertext. Fabian here in Zurich. Catch you in a second. And welcome back to SlaterPod. Today with Fabian Dietziger, founder and managing partner at Supertext. Hi, Fabian.
Hi, Florian.
Hi, Fabian.
Hi, Esther.
So happy New Year, first of all, to you.
Thank you. Happy New Year too.
Where are you joining us from?
From Zurich, Switzerland, my hometown. Today from my apartment, because actually my wife is insecure if she got the COVID or not. So this is why I put myself on quarantine and joining in from my home today.
Oh no.
Yeah, but that means your office is still somewhat open, or?
Yeah, our office is still open, but we have from about 30, 35 going to the office, and in Zurich, maybe 5-6 people are coming, the ones who are living close to the office.
Okay. Yeah, you have a pretty big office there at is it still the rooftop thing, or with the...
Sure.
With the rooftop. Okay.
With the rooftop, yeah. Yeah, this was one of the things we always wanted to have when we founded the company 15 years ago. So yes, definitely we'll keep that. I actually also live 3 minutes walk from the office, and so does Remy, the co-founder, and Rinaldo, the other co-founder, lived very close too. Yeah, when he was in Zurich.
No longer. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Yeah, living close to the office is a blessing, especially right now. I live like about 3 to 5 minutes as well. So,
I think in London it's the opposite, really, because nobody's going into the office. So apparently everybody's moving out of the city to the suburbs.
Yeah, that's an actual trend. Yeah, I heard. I also know some people moving out of the city because actually it doesn't really matter if you don't go to the office. You maybe go to a place where you have, I don't know, more space around, or
it's real. Yeah.
True.
Cool. So, well, again, thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. So, kickstarting 2021 with the word supertext is probably, it's a promising sign for this. So tell us a bit more about like the company, how you got into this business. What's your background? Like, are you a former translator? Are you a linguist? Or you came into this business from a totally different angle? Just kind of give us the origin story and how you got started in this business.
Okay, well, I grew up in a very small village far from Zurich. And I was weight like 5.1 kilograms. So I started picking into my life. That's about 11.3 pounds. And my father was a mayor and my mother was an artist. And I always wanted to leave the small town and work in international business in a big city. So I moved to Zurich and I started my career in forwarding business. And there,
great, right?
Yeah,
freight forward. Okay.
For transportation, and in the end was director of fine art transportation and storage business, so arranging transport for museums and galleries. Very interesting. And my brother was a copywriter at that time in large advertising agencies. And he was helping me improving content, like when I did marketing stuff, presentations, he did editing for me. And this was always great. And at a certain point, we thought like, this is really a great idea that you could like upload the document at that time, like 15 years ago, where the internet was much slower, that you could upload the document and a professional copywriter could edit it for you. This was basically the start of the idea of supertext. And because at that time you were able to work together with a copywriter directly, or you go to an agency, which is a lot of cost. And we thought like, this is a great model. And we searched for someone who could do the technology approach and we found my school friend Remy Plattler. He was in New York at that time at SunGard in IT technology. And he developed our first website. And then we went live, and this is how we went into the business as the first copywriting agency. We started in 1st of February 2006. And on the next day, we got our first order. And
wow. How did you get that? Like from a contact or literally like what, search engine, or how did that happen?
Yeah, we made a press release, and somehow I think it was... Yeah, I don't know. We were surprised, but it came in and we celebrated. It was really very cool. But then the next few days we got no further orders. But it steadily started in the first year. I think we made like a turnover of maybe $30,000. And
but was it like a quit job, bet the farm, this needs to work, otherwise we have a problem situation, or did you like gradually transition into this?
Well, we wanted that it's going to work, and at this time I had my job, Remy too, but Rinaldo was the first one. He put part-time already into it, and we started like a beta status, and then but with this know-how we searched for
for investors, and we found 2 investors, and with this know-how and this turnover, we quitted our jobs and went fully in 2007.
Wow.
Okay.
And then in 2007, we made a 250,000 turnover, and then the whole translation, we got requests for clients asking us if we could do translation as well.
So that was going to be my question about the transition from this origins in copywriting and having transitioned heavily to translation now. How do you think that's influenced the DNA of Supertext?
Well, we always have the approach that since we are coming from the copywriting, it's about to how you can tell something that the message arrives at the consumer. It's not about just like translating it as a task, but it's more like what you want to reach with that, what you want to say with it, that you really can do this transition. I think this was always our approach, and it is still our approach. And this is slightly different because we see that a lot of other agencies are coming like from specialist translation, like complicated stuff, and not marketing.
So basically you have this almost like a transcreation layer, maybe even like kind of in your DNA before kind of transcreation maybe was a bit of a thing, like but running this at scale is very tricky. Like, now you're a $50 million business, at least when I checked our LSPI in 2019. Like, when you get that much work, how do you maintain that kind of that flavor, that more creative flavor in a business? Because then, you are going to get these millions of words, maybe sometimes.
Well, we invest a lot into people, and we are very carefully in picking. We have a lot of internal linguists. We invest a lot into quality. We believe that even today it is much more important that you really deliver quality, like if for content which is important, we can see it in a lot of clients where you see today really bad translations, mistranslations, which can damage a brand. Because it's translated basically right, but it's not cool. It's not their message is not transported in the target market.
I think, Florian, you talk about this quite a bit about like from English to German, when you see like English to German translation, that it's like it's accurate, but it's not quite. It doesn't feel right, like it doesn't feel cool, like Fabian just said.
Oh, you're setting me up here for something, because I was really just holding myself back to not start to ramble about my thoughts about this, because I'm a former translator. So I'm like, I know exactly what Fabian's talking about. It's like, it's close and you can't kind of say it's wrong, but it's just not the way you'd actually say it. It's especially like, there's this almost new German growing that's basically like Englified. It's like, It's got English syntax. It's absolutely, it's way too it's too verbal, like, and all of these like kind of more subtle things where I get really passionate, but this is for another day. Let me hold that back. But, hey, another thing that people say is sometimes different. Like when I worked in an LSP, and I was, with the Swiss LSP, people kept saying, well, the Swiss market is different, and people here are different. Maybe that was kind of true maybe 10, 20 years ago. I mean, how is it now? How do you feel the Swiss market compares to some of the other markets you're in? I think you're in Germany and the US, right? You have an office in Berlin and LA now. So what are your thoughts around like the differences, if any?
Well, I think the difference is Switzerland is basically a very small market, but we have, if you want to do business across Switzerland, you will have to do translations, because we have 4 official languages, and if you want to do business, at least you have the largest market is the Swiss German market, and then there's the Swiss French market and the Swiss Italian. You should cover that. And we see that our clients there are mainly in marketing and communication. And if you see in the United States, this is like globalization, internationalization, more than 10 languages. They have localization teams. It's much more bigger. It's international brands rolling out all over the world. And in Germany, we see it's a lot of like industrial brands, or also we have a lot of startups in Berlin. That's the difference, I think. United States is huge. I mean, we can see that these accounts are huge because these are global brands, and in Switzerland it's big because there are a lot of local brands. We have a lot of clients that are only working for the Swiss market, but they need translation, and they need specifically translations for Switzerland. And this is what is underestimated by a lot of international players, because the Swiss French is different, and the Swiss have really high demands. I don't know any market who has that high demands in quality than Switzerland.
So one thing is also that you're based here. What do you think is that a major advantage, that like somebody picks up the phone in like Swiss local dialect and like can talk to the account manager at a retail company, and like it's really close, in addition to like understanding the local particularities? Like is that a key advantage for you in this particular market here, or not so much? Like you could say, hey, we could service this out of Berlin in the long term. We don't really need that super local flavor anymore.
We always want to keep the local flavor. I think it's especially because there are a lot of smaller accounts here in Switzerland, and the personal contact is very important to understand. And I think this also makes a difference to the large players. The large players, it's more like you call in a call center, dial number 1 for the Swiss market, number 2 for German market, And I think this is definitely where we don't want to go. I think the personal touch is very important, that we're very agile, and I think this makes us also special, that there is direct people behind you. We show who are the people behind, who are the person to get in touch with. That's very important, I think.
So you had this, well, I suppose on the customer side, it's all quite domestic, at least in Switzerland, from what you're saying, when you're talking about there being multilingual requirements within Switzerland, and obviously US being so different. What was the motivation for wanting to expand into the US in particular?
My brother was on a sabbatical 3 months in the United States, and he thought, like, we're like working for a long time. We opened up in Germany, and they said, it's time for a change, and we have a great mission. We want to free the world from bad copy. So where are the huge markets? It's in Europe and in the United States. So let's go out there and set it up and go for it. We want we want to try it in the United States. This was the motivation, and also Christy, who was in our English team in Zurich, also went with him, and it's fantastic. We made, of course, research what kind of companies are around. Is there any chance? And we see with our creative approach there is a large potential, because we were seeing that the large volumes are going to the top 10, and But if it comes to trends creation, then a lot of companies, they rely on freelancers. And I thought like there is a place where we can jump in and provide it as a specialized agency specializing in this trends creation area. And this has developed so very well. And for us, it's very important and very interesting to see. We see more trends coming from the United States. We can really learn from the different markets. That helps us developing our company from the global view.
And then on that, do you expect to expand into other regions and other countries as well?
Why not? Why not? We are always looking for opportunities. Of course, we would be interested in the Asian market, but I think it has to do if we meet the right person who has the SuperTax DNA, then we are ready to start in another market. But I think it's really much. We don't believe in this M&A. We believe that if we have someone here at SuperTax and then bring it over somewhere, we have to start it on our own structure, and not like buying another company and try cultural change. So when
Rinaldo, when Rinaldo went over there, it was pure, just that there was nothing, right? It was organic, plant the flag, start from scratch.
Exactly, like landing on the moon.
Landing in
LA.
LA.
I can tell you, in California, it has never rained, for a long time. We went over and then it was raining, so we could put our seats. And now after some times, we can also have some return back. Now we can see after, like last year, we had we doubled our turnover in the United States.
Nice. Let's talk about this year and COVID, or sorry, last year. It's not last year. The COVID year. What did you see on the customer side? The type of work, demand shifts, etc. Like, what were some of the key trends for you coming out of this lockdown situation?
Yeah, we see that the different industries, the impact was different. Some were affected very hard, some less. We can see a shift in cutting costs, like we have much more, but a lot of machine translation, post editing, but this is also a general trend. So, but generally we have been lucky, and we also had onboardings of large accounts. So we still have an increase of about 10% compared to the year before, I think, which is a very good performance.
And then how did you adapt operationally? I know you mentioned that some people at least are still in the office or are in the office right now in Zurich, but presumably you were working to some extent with distributed teams. And what tools did you use to collaborate?
We have I think 2 years ago, we implemented Microsoft Teams, I think, which is really a great tool. And since some functions are like similar to Slack, this helped us a lot. So we have every employee has a laptop. So and our system is based in the cloud. We were really good prepared to work remote. So it was really for us not such a big thing. In the beginning, the people, they didn't like, or the employees didn't like to work from home. And then they got used to the situation, like more, you're organizing your day difference. And I think it will be also, it will always be different. Not everybody will be full coming back, because there are also advantages working from home. But for me personally, I like to be very much to be in an office and having direct contact with our employees. I think it changes, but we have adopted really very well to it, and I'm really proud of the whole team, how they manage that. That's really fantastic.
Maybe not only in the context of COVID, but like, how do you guys run sales and marketing? I mean, I do get your occasional emails with a really great subject line, so I tend to open them. But in terms of the direct sales, generally, and maybe now with this distance, component in it, how do you run that?
They're doing much more presentations, like online calls, video conferences. We also, before, we worked a lot with the LinkedIn Sales Navigator. But I think it's, let's say, to really get new leads. I mean, we are working with the Sales Navigator. We also produce a lot of great content in our blogs, where we distribute and distribute via social media and get leads from there. But I think it's because a lot is people business. I think this is a little bit more difficult now, to approach, because if you know somebody, it's much easier to do a video call than if you make a sales call and say, hey, let's do some video, I think that's a little bit a different thing. But it has been also like, it was not fully locked. The situation, I think it's different in Switzerland. It was not always full lockdown, so we're still able to see people. And in the United States, I think it's different, but we're also working with online tools, and that works out really very well.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, we could, in the summer, there's a lot. You could probably still have meetings here without feeling too bad. Maybe now, not so much. No. Hey, you mentioned that you're very much organic, right? In terms of the way you grow. And also, you mentioned that you brought in investors like super, super early in the company's life. But if I'm correct, probably not since then, right? You didn't take on any outside funding since kind of the very early days of the company. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have not investors. We have business angels. I mean, we started with 2 business angels. Just straight when we started in 2007 was our last financial round.
So walk me through this though, because this industry, I mean, there's this whole M&A craze, everybody buying everybody else. And if they're not buying, at least they're looking. And then a lot of people looking for funding. Why are you guys so set on organic growth? Like it's like you're not even leaving like an option open, if I'm correct. Like you maybe like a tiny little window, maybe if the absolute perfect partner came around, but like you're pretty much adamant, like we're not gonna buy another LSP. We're basically going our 10% steady organic game. Like what's the thinking behind this?
Well, speaking for me, I mean, I don't see a reason for buying another LSP in Switzerland. I would only do if I'm not doing my business right and have problems in organic growth. Internationally, maybe it looks different. I can clearly see that, for example, what Technisys did, that they want to become one of the top 10 players in the market, and of course that makes sense. But the efforts, what it will need to bring the people together on one brand, what they have to do on long term, they will lose half of the turnover of every company you do an M&A. I think, if we would buy another LSP in Switzerland, we'd lose half of the turnover, because that's the perfect point to change the supplier for the clients. And for us, we are winning a lot of clients because what the other players in Switzerland do, because of M&A, because of international rebranding, they are finding with us a partner who is who is running its own business. We are doing it because I'm part of the owner. I'm doing it. It's a passion, It's not just private equity, It's not just about money, It's about passion for what we do. And I think this also makes a big difference, and makes a big difference in the mindset of the whole company. It's what we're trying to roll out and push. Yeah.
So I think it would be good to get your take on something slightly different, which is the funding boom that's happening in the TMS and machine translation space at the moment. And really, how do you see that from an LSP user perspective? How does that impact daily life? Are you getting better, MT and TMS products because of these funding rounds, do you think?
Yeah, it's getting more complicated, more interesting. We have our own TMS as well, but we are also working with other TMS, with other tools. I think for me, I think I always try to look at it from a customer perspective. I mean, how can I help the customer to make his translation or internationalization needs the best? How I can solve that? What are the best tools for the client situation? So we're trying to use the tools that fits best. If it's ours, that's cool. If not, it's another one. I think every tool specializes in something different. We are also checking out all the MT tools, what language combination works, what kind of text work with them. So I think it's interesting, but it's a lot is popping up, and sometimes I think it would be cool if there would be one larger thing that would work for everything, but then it's like then it's no more independent. That's the difficult thing. Also, what happens to Trados with the RWS? There are unsecure things, We are also pushing like open source Translate 5, which we think is really cool.
Now you said that, like, okay, you have your core internal TMS, but you're also using other tools if like the client requests it. But where do you draw the line? Like if some client comes around with like a $10,000 job, but like wants to force you on some like obscure TMS, like would you draw the line there and say no, or like are you like super open to just using anything and you're set up for that?
Yeah, maybe for 10,000. If it's a single project, or if it's it depends on most of the tools today. All the tools are cool because you can export the things, and we handle. I mean, we invest a lot into we invest more than 1 million into our IT every year, and we have we have 12 people, and we can handle all the formats. So we are interested to find a solution. Say, hey, okay, let's see what makes sense, and then we either take it somewhere with all the tools you can download, and then you have the data in a database, so it's translatable. Databases are always fine.
Get it. Just kind of coming towards the end, like in terms of the whole automation, human in the loop model, next 5-10 years, crystal ball outlook, like since you're so much, but you're in this creative space, right? And where maybe MT so far hasn't really provided major boosts to productivity. I mean, what's your take there? How does the whole automation on the language side impact the more creative side of translation? Has it yet? Will it? When will it? What do you do about it?
We are okay. We are focusing on both, like the creative side and also machine translation, post editing. I mean, I see on the machine post editing side, there are more relevant, especially for just machine translation, that you have somebody to control it. It's like more the approach to. You need somebody to test if the translations are right or not. So it's going into that direction. In the creative part, I think if you want if you are a brand who really want to emphasize your audience, you will need a human, because you will need somebody who really can transcreate. I think this is really important, and I think that will last. I really don't believe that a machine can really transcreate that great copy, at least for a long time, because then you could also say you could throw in some keywords and then a machine is writing you a terrific text or advertisement, and I think that doesn't work.
Yeah, but I keep saying if it works at some point in the future, then we probably have other issues to deal with than translation, because then you have like sentient AI. We just had the quote from Chris. You used to work for Netflix, kind of ramped up their localization over the past 8 years, and now founded this new entertainment globalization organization in LA. And his quote was that we picked as one of our top quotes for 2020. He was like, he doesn't know where it's going, but to really replace in the media space, to use MT at scale, like it would have to become as good as like, it may I'm butchering the quote, but it will happen when Google is able to write a best-selling novel, like automatically, something like that. So yes, you kind of have sentient AI.
Yeah, and I also think that today it's really important. People are more online. They are reading. And I think if I'm watching Netflix and then sometimes if it doesn't really match like the dubbing and the subtitles, and it's really different. It depends on what language you're watching. If you're watching in English or German, and
expectations are going up. Like quality expectations of people are very, very high, because the baseline is also going. Hey, let's close on your top 3 trends or predictions for this year. What's going to happen? Business, non-business, COVID, non-COVID, super text, non-super text.
Well, my prediction is that we will launch a new service in the next weeks, which will be really very, very cool. And I think we were really filling a gap there, and I can't tell you more yet.
Drum roll.
Yeah, I will definitely notice you first.
Please.
Yeah, that's something between human and machine, and has to do with speed, machine, human. So really cool.
Cyborg translation.
Yeah, I think that's also like a topic. Faster turnarounds are definitely something that will be a trend. So we can see that's 4 years, but it's accelerating dramatically. Also, what I said about this this testing of machine translation, the whole in context stuff. I mean, if you have it in databases, how the end product looks, that how can you make sure that the output, how you can solve this to better test it, and
That's fine.
We see more this streaming stuff. We have much more like requests for complete solution stopping and like whole service projects. And I think this is a trend that we are more going away from selling like product services, but we sell solutions.
Package. Great. On that note, hope to catch up with you when I think they're going to keep us not in lockdown, but like until Feb, but probably spring. Let's meet here in this beautiful town of Zurich. Thanks so much for doing this, Fabian.
Thanks, Fabian.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Really appreciate it. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.